Pokemon. I know Pokemon. You probably know Pokemon. I mean, at least I'd hope so if you clicked on this video. It takes up about half my room in merch and is probably on the list of medias that you'd either least expect me to like or can just tell directly from the way I look that it's one of my favorite franchises of all time. And whether you're a big fan of the franchise or if you know barely anything about it, you'll probably just know it for being a bright and cheery game series. However, what I want to talk about today is the side of the franchise which shows off the more spookier part of the series. Because most people who know about the game also know about its creepy Pokédex entries, things like Driftbloom kidnapping kids, the skull on a Cubone coming from its mother, or that the entire Litwick to Chandelure evolutionary line just stalks people who are about to fucking die. Just for a lot of Pokemon, specifically those that are ghost or dark types, they have some pretty freaky Pokédex entries. Pokemon is not that far away from its horror aspects, and in today's video, I'm gonna go through a couple of different ways that this has been interpreted by the fandom itself. And if this video does well, I may even talk about it more in the future. There are a surprising amount of Pokemon creepypastas, and there are even longer ones, such as Lost Silver or Strangled Red, which could even get their own videos in the future. Because, compared to the ones that I'm going to be talking about in this video, they are surprisingly long. And I should also quickly point out that this video was originally a suggestion from my Discord server about just Lavender Town Syndrome itself, and I just decided to make the video about a few more because of just how short it is. If you want the chance for me to talk about one of your favorite horror topics next, or even just specifically Pokemon creepypastas next, make sure to head on over there. But without further ado, let's get into our first spooky Pokemon media. Lavender Town Syndrome, also known as Lavender Town Tone or Lavender Town, was a peak and illnesses of children between the ages of 7 to 12 shortly after the release of Pokemon Red and Green in Japan back in February 27th of 1996. Rumors say that these illnesses only occurred after the children playing the game reached Lavender Town, whose theme music had extremely high frequencies that studies showed that only children and young teens could hear, since their ears are more sensitive. Due to the Lavender Tone, at least 200 children supposedly committed, and many more developed illnesses and afflictions. The children who committed usually did so by hanging or jumping from heights. Those who did not act irrationally complained of severe headaches after listening to Lavender Town's theme. Although Lavender Town now sounds differently depending on the game, this mass hysteria was caused by the first Pokemon game released. After the Lavender Tone incident, the programmers had fixed Lavender Town's theme music to be at a lower frequency. And since children were no longer affected by it, one video appeared in 2010 using a special software to analyze the audio of Lavender Town's music. When played, the software created images of the Unown near the end of the audio. This raised a controversy since the Unown didn't appear until the Generation 2 game, Silver, Gold, and Crystal. The Unown translate to leave now. There is also the said beta version of Lavender Town. It is said that the beta version of Pocket Monsters was released to some kids to test the games, but it's still unknown and unrecorded what occurred during these specific testings, and if these children suffered from what we now call Lavender Town Syndrome. Damn, I got a little bit of a headache after that one. Lavender Town Syndrome is probably the most common out of the Pokemon creepypastas that I'll be talking about today, and is also most likely one of the first ones to come to mind. Obviously, being a creepypasta, the tale isn't real, however with a lot of other creepypastas, you can kinda see how this one was believed to be real by a lot of people. It's a lot like the Smile Dog image. If you tell someone that looking at this creepy image will make them feel scared and paranoid, they will most likely begin to feel scared and paranoid just because it's a creepy image, and that's just how people work. So it would work the same with Lavender Town. You tell someone that listening to this high-pitched pixel tune track will give them a headache, and it most likely will. It's a lot like the saying that whatever the brain believes is real is technically real to that person. The reason tales like this work so well is because until you learn otherwise, your only source about what's happening is the story itself. So whatever the tale says is going to happen after XYZ things happen, you are most likely going to believe it. I mean, I wouldn't go against someone telling me that looking at this image of a Grim Foxy plushie would make my eyes fall out, until I either experience it for myself or learn from another source that what they're saying is wrong. I make this point to say that the reason Lavender Town is so popular and works in its favor is because until you learn through whatever means that the story isn't real, it is very easy to believe that it is. I'm what you could call a collector of bootleg Pokemon games. Pokemon Diamond and Jade, Chaos Black, etc. It's amazing the frequency with which you can find them at pawn shops, Goodwill, flea markets and such. They're generally fun even if they are unplayable, which they often are. The mistranslations and poor quality make them unintentionally humorous. I've been able to find most of the ones that I've played online, but there's one that I haven't seen any mention of. I bought it at a flea market over 15 years ago now. Here's a picture of the cartridge in case anyone recognizes it. The game started with the familiar Nidorino and Gengar intro of the red and blue version. However, the press start screen had been altered. Red was there, but the Pokemon did not cycle through. It also said black version under the Pokemon logo. Upon selecting new game, the game started the Professor Oak speech, and it quickly became evident that this game was essentially just Pokemon Red version. After selecting your starter, if you looked at your Pokemon, you had in addition to Bulbasaur, Charmander, or Squirtle, another Pokemon. Ghost. The Pokemon was level 1, it had the sprite of the ghosts that are encountered in Lavender Tower before obtaining the Sliff Scope. It had one attack. Curse. I know that there is a real move named Curse, but the attack did not exist in Generation 1, so it appears it was hacked in. Defending Pokemon were unable to attack Ghost, it would only say that they were too scared to move. When the move Curse was used in battle, the screen would cut to black, the cry of the defending Pokemon would be heard, but it was distorted, played at a much lower pitch than usual. The battle screen would then reappear and the defending Pokemon would be gone. If used in a battle against a trainer, when the Pokeballs represented their Pokemon would appear in the corner, they would have one fewer Pokeball. The implication was that the Pokemon had died. What's even stranger is that after defeating a trainer and seeing Red received 60 for winning, the battle commands would appear again. If you selected Run, the battle would end as it normally does. You could also select Curse. If you did, upon returning to the overworld, the trainer's sprite would be gone. After leaving and re-entering the area, the spot where the trainer had been would be replaced with a tombstone, like the ones at Lavender Tower. The move Curse was not usable in all these instances. It would fail against other ghosts. It would also fail if it was used against trainers that you would have to face again, such as your rival in Giovanni. It was usable in your final battle against them, however. I figured that this was just a gimmick of the game, allowing you to use the previously uncatchable ghosts, and because Curse made the game so easy, I essentially just used it throughout the entire adventure. The game changed quite a bit after defeating the Elite Four. After viewing the Hall of Fame, which consisted of ghosts and a couple of Pokemon I used for HMs, the screen cut to black. A box appeared with the words "many years later." It then cut to Lavender Tower. An old man was standing looking at tombstones. You then realized that this man was your character. The man moved at only half of your normal walking speed, you no longer had any Pokemon with you, not even Ghost, who up to this point had been impossible to remove from your party even through depositing him into the PC. The overworld was entirely empty. There were no people at all. There were still the tombstones of the trainers that you'd use Curse on, however. You could go pretty much anywhere in the overworld at this point, where your movement was limited by the fact that you had no Pokemon to use HMs. And regardless of where you went, the music of Lavender Town continued on an infinite loop. After wandering for a while, I found that if you go through Diglett's Cave, one of the cuttable bushes that normally blocks the path to the other side is no longer there, allowing you to advance and return to Pallet Town. Upon entering your house and going to the exact tile where you start the game, the screen would cut to black. Then a sprite of Caterpie appeared. It was then replaced by Weedle, and then a Pidgey. I soon realized as the Pokemon progressed from Rattata to Blastoise, that these were all the Pokemon that I had used Curse on. After the end of my rival's team, a youngster appeared, and then a bug catcher. These were the trainers I had cursed. Throughout the sequence, the Lavender Town music was playing, but it was slowly decreasing in pitch. By the time your rival appeared on screen, it was little more than a demonic rumble. Another cut to black. A few moments later, the battle screen suddenly appeared. Your trainer sprite was now that of an old man, the same one as the one who teaches you how to catch Pokemon in Viridian City. Ghost appears on the other side, along with the words, "Ghost wants to fight." You couldn't use items, you had no Pokemon, if you tried to run you couldn't escape. The only option was fight. Using fight would immediately cause you to struggle, which didn't affect Ghost but did chip off a bit of your own HP. When it was Ghost's turn to attack, it would simply say, "Ghost used Curse." Eventually, when your HP reached a critical point, Ghost would finally use Curse. The screen cut to black a final time. Regardless of the buttons you pressed, you were permanently stuck in this black screen. At this point, the only thing that you could do was turn the Game Boy off. When you played again, New Game was the only option. The game had erased the file. I played through this hack game many times, and every time the game ended with this sequence. Several times I didn't use Ghost at all, though it was impossible to remove from the party. In these cases, it didn't show any Pokemon or trainers and simply cut to the climatic battle with Ghost. I'm not sure what the motives were behind the creator of this hack, it wasn't widely distributed, so presumably not for monetary gain. And it was very well done for a bootleg. It seems like they were trying to convey a message. But it seems I was the first receiver of this message. I'm still not entirely sure what it was. The inevitability of death? The pointlessness of it? Perhaps they were simply trying to morbidly inject death and darkness into a children's game. Regardless, this children's game has made me think. And it has made me cry. Pokemon Black is a great example of the pawn shop flea market ROM hack game concept. It doesn't push too hard into trying to be scary for the sake of scary, and doesn't begin to bring in some kind of outside force like the spirit of some random person coming to get you for just playing some fucked up Game Boy cartridge. It's just some freaky hack game, and that's all it needs to be. I feel like with a lot of the "I found a blank hacked game and spooky stuff happened" stories, crossed the line of being a believable tale and just end up turning into another EXE game by pushing way too hard into the horror genre and begin to pull out all of the cliche stocks. You know the ones. It's the main character of blank game, but their eyes are red and they're covered in blood and has their own texture or model from this complete other game in the franchise, or it's just custom made and they're possessed by this spirit claiming to be God and ooh, they're really powerful and know everything. And then they just end up showing up in the real world instead of just the game that's originally meant to be the spooky part. However, with Pokemon Black, it managed to stay perfectly on that line. It brings in all the parts that make the spooky game cartridge without beginning to topple over into the category of trying too hard. It stays in its own little lane and it works wonders for it. On top of all of it, it does what is probably one of my favorite things that a story can do. It makes the reader think. Pokemon Black makes the reader think and doesn't deliver the reader with some kind of solid ending. The idea of just the story saying, what does it all mean, I don't know, figure it out yourself, all just leads back to this wonderful idea of coming up with your own conclusion that I feel like a lot of these creepypastas lack. And for that, I just enjoy it a lot. And I feel like a lot of other creepypastas involving hacked game cartridges should take a good look at Pokemon Black and learn from it. I'll be talking about one of those stories later. Now, I'll admit that Missingno isn't a fandom-made thing, it's official to the old Red, Blue, and Yellow games, but I just want to talk about it just because of how popular it is to just video game culture as a whole, and how it kind of got stigmatized for being a creepy glitch, quote-unquote. For those who don't know, Missingno was just a glitch encounter that you could get in the old versions of Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow. They're still there now, but like, beside the point. There are 5 noted versions of the original Missingno, however, due to the fact that some Missingnos have actual cries, and not just the game's default cry, they have garnered the theory that these Missingnos could have possibly have been deleted Pokemon species that just never made it into the game. If the player manages to view the Pokedex through whatever form of corruption or other kinds of glitches of Missingno, it'll play Rhydon's cry before showing a blank Pokedex and just a couple of glitchy noises. Missingno cannot evolve and cannot learn any moves by leveling up. Now, talking about the specific forms themselves, the original most common and most well-known red and blue version can be encountered in a variety of ways, but it's entirely exclusive to the red and blue version of the game. It's classified as a normal bird type, which is kind of odd, because it looks like a weird fucking bird to me. Then we have the yellow exclusive version, which works very similarly to the red and blue version, except that it will fuck your shit up. The yellow version of Missingno is like the meaner older brother of the red and blue version because it can cause your game to freeze or crash upon encountering it, and even after its encounter it will just cause a lot of graphical errors and for every single character on screen to just start walking in some random direction like they've got somewhere to be. And it's just, in general, not safe at all to encounter. Then there's the more specific fossil and ghost versions, which in order to encounter them, require more of a specific, like, it's more slimmed down than the others. On top of this, they work kind of differently because they don't have any kind of stats, like, at all. So they'll just take whatever stats were there from the last Pokemon in the player's party, and if sent out by the player themselves, the data will be taken from the last Pokemon that they had sent out instead. These versions include a fossil sprite of Kabutops, a fossil sprite of Aerodactyl, and the ghost sprite from the Pokemon Tower. It all comes back to Lavender Town. It always comes back to Lavender Town. The ghost version can actually be obtained through its own method of evolving .Pokemon or Z, which are both other glitch Pokemon at level 224. If you attempt to trade a Missingno, it will just state that your name seems abnormal, and it'll just cancel the trade. And there's a lot more to talk about with the Missingno phenomena, but I will be completely honest when I say that when I start seeing lots of numbers, I get a little bit out of my depth. But the Bulbapedia, which is where I got a lot of this information, has an absolutely humongous page going in depth about what causes this glitch to happen, and out of everything that Pokemon has to offer from its own creepy ways, I'd say that Missingno is probably up there with one of the weirdest. It might not be particularly creepy, but for me, anything glitchy is just kind of creepy to me. Things going wrong isn't particularly what you want. But if you want to know more about Missingno, I'd suggest going over to the Bulbapedia site, which I will have a link to in the description. In general, there is a lot to talk about when it comes to the spooky side of the Pokemon franchise, and it's definitely a topic that I could come back to and make another video about in the future if you guys seem interested about it. Pokemon as a franchise is one that I don't really get to talk about often due to my channel being primarily one of the horror genre, but getting to see this creepier version of it created by the fanbase that surrounds it was really nice to make a video about. And of course, let me know if you want to see me talk about a few of the longer stories, such as Lost Silver and Strangled Red, like I said before, because I try to keep my videos as short as I can, due to me having to work on a lot of my other projects, which, by the way, I've begun progress on a FNAF-styled horror game called Tesca Vermis. It's currently just at the start of its development, but we currently have a Discord server and a Gamejolt page, if you want to learn more about it. The main gist of it is that it's going to be a mix of FNAF 4 and Fatal Frame style gameplay, with the movements of FNAF 4 and the defending style of using the camera, much like in Fatal Frame. The whole thing takes place in this, like, blizzard cabin in the middle of absolute buttfuck nowhere, so you can't leave until the blizzard has gone away. But just know that you're not the only thing in that cabin. Of course, I'll try my best to keep pumping out videos as much as I can on a regular basis, but in the meantime, I will majorly be focusing on this project. But for now, that'll be all. Let me know what you want to hear me talk about next, and make sure not to miss my next upload by subscribing, and I'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.